A parliamentary deadlock, some grim economic reading, and uninspiring numbers for the major leaders.
We've got a big challenge, and we've been working our way through it.
New Zealanders can see that this government's taking the country backwards.
Kia ora, ko Giles Dexter aho, ane te purongo tōrangapū mō tēnei wiki. Welcome to Focus on Politics. The latest RNZ-Reid Research poll arrived on Tuesday and shows nobody will be putting in an order for the confetti cannons just yet. Here's RNZ's acting political editor Craig McCulloch with the numbers.
The race is razor tight. It is about as tight as you can get. In terms of the actual numbers, Labour is coming in here as the top dog, the most popular party, just above 34%, up about 1 point compared to that last poll in June. Just behind, you've got National on 32.5%, also bouncing up about 2 points. Both of them will be encouraged by that, although I would say the movements are very much within that margin of error, plus or minus 3.1%. You've got the Greens then in third place, just under 11%. New Zealand First on almost 9% and ACT just above 7%. Very small movements for them one way or the other, no big swings. And the final party that we should look at is Te Pāti Māori, arguably one of the more interesting ones here. It has taken quite a hit, sliding 1.4 points down to about 4% below that 5% threshold. We can talk a bit more about why that's interesting in a moment. But beyond that, we also have about almost 6% of voters who are either undecided or saying that they will not vote.
Yeah, okay, so what would this mean when you break it down into seats in Parliament?
Well, when we talk about a razor-tight race, this is what I mean. These results would generate a 60-60 split, or perhaps a 61-60 split, depending on how those Māori seats play out. So the current coalition parties would get 60, 40 for National, 11 for New Zealand First, and 9 for ACT. On the other side, Labour would pick up 42, the Greens 13, and Te Pāti Māori 5, assuming that it holds at least one of its electorate seats. Now, that would be 62, neither side able to form majority. Probably that means a hung parliament. But there is a caveat here, and that is that if Te Pāti Māori holds all 6 of the seats that it has now, then there would be a one-seat overhang. You would end up with 121 MPs in Parliament rather than 120. That would mean that the left bloc actually squeezes up to 61 seats, 61-60, a very, very narrow majority. So those Māori seats could end up being very pivotal.
The party leaders aren't celebrating, but they're not concerned either.
I was elected in 2023 to do a job. I know what that job was, fix the economy, restore law and order, deliver better public services. There's an opportunity in 2026 for New Zealanders to then make their decision as to whether they think we're the right people to take the country forward.
I'm encouraged to see our polling getting into the mid-30s, but I'm not content with that. I want to see that grow significantly more.
The voters will judge if the economic opportunity comes in time for an election. My personal driver is, will I be able to one day tell my grandkids we did a good job in government? And if we do that, maybe we'll win the election too.
Some people are feeling really despondent, and that's why Chloe and I and all of our MPs are focused on getting on the ground.
You talk about your polls. We had a poll Sunday a week ago where over 1,000 people turned up to a speech at our convention. Those are the polls we watch.
If Te Pāti Māori keeps all of its 6 electorate seats, it would create an overhang and give the left bloc enough seats to form a government. Just. That's been complicated by continued fallout from comments made by Te Pāti Māori MP Takuta Ferris towards Indians, Asians, Black and Pākehā for volunteering in the Tāmaki Makaurau by-election. While the party co-leaders have said they do not support Mr Ferris's comments, party president John Tamihere this week told Radio Wātea he agrees with the substance of them. Chris Hipkins says how the party deals with the issue will have a bearing on Labour's relationship with Te Pāti Māori going into the election.
I don't see any place in New Zealand politics for that kind of sentiment. We should be focused on bringing people together. That means recognising the huge contribution that all of our communities make to Aotearoa.
It's evident the next election will be fought on the economy, currently faltering, and there's plenty of blame to share around. Nearly 38% of voters say the coalition is most responsible for the current economic situation, while 31% pin it on the previous government. 24% say both sides are equally responsible, perhaps suggesting they're tiring of the blame game. Not that it's stopped parties this week from pointing fingers.
We inherited the biggest recession in 35 years. We inherited a long COVID hangover, and we've inherited a situation around tariffs, which has caused a huge amount of uncertainty around the world and here in New Zealand as well. But having said all of that, I think New Zealand's got a fantastic future ahead of us, and that's why we've been working very hard on making sure we do fix the economy and ultimately we get the economy growing.
National's been in government for nearly 2 years now. All they seem to want to do is find blame and excuses rather than solutions to the problems facing the country. I think that's one of the reasons New Zealanders are switching off this government. They can see that they're just more interested in blaming people for problems rather than fixing them.
People are voting on the economy, which is tough for a huge number of people, but I believe people will still be voting on the economy in a year's time when much of the work that our government's done to contain cost, cut red tape, give a bit of hope is starting to pay off, and so we just know the best thing we can do is keep doing the work.
The crises we are seeing today, worsening homelessness, worsening poverty and inequality, and more degradation of our natural world, are directly from decisions that this government has made.
That's why we campaigned at the last election to say how bad the inheritance we would receive was. The cost of living was going through the roof, inflation was going through the roof. At least we've tamed that. It'll take time.
The economic malaise was rammed home on Thursday by the latest GDP figures, showing a 0.9% contraction in the June quarter. The worse-than-expected results jar against the government's description of 2025 as the year of growth, and the appointment of Nicola Willis as the Minister for Economic Growth.
Going for growth is without a doubt the number one job this year.
And yet, the economy has not been growing. Fronting the numbers, Nicola Willis blamed it on Liberation Day.
The Trump tariff announcement did have an outsized impact on New Zealanders' willingness to invest and grow after a period of difficult recovery. 1 in 4 jobs in New Zealand depend on exports. We're a small, isolated country at the bottom of the world. When the world sneezes, we feel it hard.
The Prime Minister has leapt to her defence.
Nicola Willis is the best finance minister New Zealand is ever going to have. Oh, no doubt in my mind. She is doing an outstanding job. I want her to carry on as Minister of Economic Growth. Outstanding individual, outstanding minister, best person in the whole of this country to be leading New Zealand through the economic challenges.
But two former finance ministers, Sir Roger Douglas and Ruth Richardson, say the government's approach isn't working.
We've got a huge problem in terms of our unfunded liabilities for welfare, and Nicola Willis has the responsibility to fix it. It doesn't really matter that people before her did a poor job or didn't do anything about it and left her with a huge problem, and she does have a huge problem, but it's her job and her job only to fix it.
Public spending has gone up, not down. And it's been the ruination of our economy. You have to look at the evidence, and the evidence suggests that another tack is required, a bold tack, and I think it's the responsibility of any government when it finds that its policy settings are failing to address the issue, and I'm saying they should address the issue decisively. I think a spring statement in which the Minister, on behalf of the government, says, look, we're facing a lot of challenges. Some of them were unanticipated. Some of them are hard to get to grips with. But it's in the country's interest and our economy's interest to start tackling this problem decisively.
What do you make of the Minister pointing to as she put it, the international turmoil, particularly around the tariffs that came from the United States, as one of the factors that sort of led to that GDP drop yesterday?
Previously from the Labour government, it was from Russia with love. It was the war in Ukraine. Now it's Trump's terrible tariffs. We've got to weather those storms. And weathering those storms means that we have to get ourselves in better shape to weather the storms. It's not what happens to us, it's how we deal with it. And that's why I've got a call to arms. Come on, government, be honest enough to address the fact that your current policies are not working, that the economy and the country deserves better. Take your courage in your hands and start to roll out policies that will genuinely grow the economy, which, if I listen to the government, is their number one objective.
There are signs the economy will grow in the September quarter, and Nicola Willis says there is no intention to change course.
We will stick to the plan. What our plan is about is gradually consolidating a massive structural deficit left to us by the last government, who spent like drunken sailors. We are spending far more efficiently, but yes, that does involve continuing to resource frontline services, which are very important to New Zealanders. And we've illustrated with our plan, we can get back to surplus, we can get the debt curve down, we can meet our fiscal goals, while also ensuring we're supporting growth and activity in the economy.
But the poll suggests people are unconvinced that there are better times ahead. Nearly half of respondents believe the country is heading in the wrong direction, compared to just over a third who think it's going the right way. Here's Craig McCulloch telling Morning Report what that all means and why all parties should be on high alert.
That increasing pessimism should be really worrying the coalition. We often talk about the right track, wrong track question as being a leading indicator of the government's fortunes. Effectively, it's a vibe check, right? It's a vibe check. When people feel good, when they're optimistic, they're unlikely to switch things up. If they're worried, if they're pessimistic about the future, they're more inclined to want some sort of change, and that potentially could be a change of government. Now, that is often the case. I should say that's not always the case, and we have to remember there are other factors at play here too. This is a first-term government. It has not been very long since Labour was in power. So the question is, how short are people's memories? And that is why we asked this blame question. And the findings there suggest that there are three sizable blocks sort of shaping up. Those numbers, again, for listeners, almost 38% blaming the current coalition, about 31% blaming Labour, and 24% blaming both. I think that is why we are seeing the party support sort of stuck on each side. You're saying that voters may be pessimistic, but there is a whole lot of blame to share around. If you dig into those numbers a little bit more, I would say there are potentially some worrying results for the coalition. A not inconsiderable number of New Zealand First and ACT supporters are actually blaming the coalition, and quite a lot of New Zealand First supporters, 35% of them, say that both sides are equally to blame. So potentially they could end up being disgruntled voters who don't turn up.
The apathy is also on display in the preferred Prime Minister results. Chris Hipkins leads on 23%, ahead of Christopher Luxon on 19.6%. Nearly 2 years into the term, with the next election around a year away, New Zealanders still aren't hot on either Chris. Just a third of respondents think Christopher Luxon is performing well as Prime Minister, while nearly half think he's performing poorly, a net rating of minus 15.2. Just under 40% think Chris Hipkins is doing well as Leader of the Opposition, with 35% disapproving, giving him a net result of 3. It's both leaders' lowest approval ratings yet. But few people think a change of leader would improve either party's chances at the next election, and the majority couldn't name an alternative. Here's Craig McCulloch again.
There's no escaping these approval ratings are definitely bad, particularly so for Christopher Luxon as a sitting Prime Minister. He won't be happy about that. He shouldn't be happy about that. His caucus won't be happy about that either. But that said, the party polling is what matters the most, the party figures. And right now it's just not worrying enough for the party to take such a high-risk action. It is one thing to swap a leader out in opposition. It is another thing entirely when in government, and particularly in a coalition arrangement. National MPs would need to be very confident that if they rolled Christopher Luxon, for example, that would not inadvertently collapse the coalition. If you go back to the last time that a New Zealand Prime Minister was rolled, Jenny Shipley replacing Jim Bolger, ultimately that led to a complete breakdown in relationship with Winston Peters at the time. The coalition then collapsed and National went on to lose in 1999, so not exactly a success story.
And on the Labour side of things, again, I suppose it's a similar story. Chris Hipkins has got his numbers up from the election results. That's probably keeping things at bay.
Yeah, it is easier to change leader in opposition. Of course, we've seen that play out many a time to various results. We have not heard much disgruntlement from Labour's caucus at all this term, though. Chris Hipkins has done a good job of sort of holding his MPs together. There hasn't been the backstabbing and leaking that you sometimes see in opposition. On the other hand, Chris Hipkins carries that baggage, right? He's a former Prime Minister. He was voted out not that long ago. A lot of voters still associate him with the COVID-19 lockdowns, particularly up in Auckland. So really what it comes down to is whether there's anyone there, whether anyone else would do any better and do they want it. And this poll suggests it might not make a difference anyway.
There's another reason for Labour to be somewhat cautious in its optimism following this poll result. And as it prepares to unveil its tax policy, likely a capital gains tax, it'll be mindful its slim lead could evaporate if it fails to sell the plan. Asked for their views on a CGT on investment properties, voters fall into three main blocks. The largest number, about 43%, are in favour, but a sizable 36% remain opposed and another 22% are unsure. RNZ political reporter Russell Palmer asked Chris Hipkins whether he thought there was wider public support for such a policy.
Polling indicates that I think New Zealanders want to have that discussion around how we can ensure that our tax base is broader and meets our needs going into the future.
Do you think it could be beneficial for the economy?
Look, I know, like, it's dangerous territory for me because then I get into defending a tax that we haven't announced or a tax position that we haven't formulated yet. So I'll pass.
But with the margins razor thin and the public increasingly disgruntled at the way the country's heading, Labour will be coming under pressure to explain what it would do differently. And the government will need to rely on more than global events going in its favour to convince people things are back on track. There won't be any room for slip-ups. That was Focus on Politics. I'm Giles Dexter. Thank you for joining us. Mā te wā.